All right. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us. We have just a couple minutes here, so I'm going to wait one more minute. I see the count of people joining us is still going up. So while we're waiting, I will tell everybody we are scheduled for an hour and this meeting is being recorded. So if you know people who couldn't come or if you want to share it with your bee clubs or look at it again for some of the slides content. It will be available. It'll be sent to everybody that registered after we're done. So feel free to share the recorded webinar. During the presentation, please, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A and we will have time afterward to talk about your questions. So put them in there along the way. And if you have any questions afterwards or want to get involved with this, please reach out to myself or to Izzy. You see our email on this first slide, so we're pretty easy to find. So feel free to reach out and ask for more information. All right, I'm just going to ask my team, can you hear me? Is everything ready to go?
You're good.
Great. Okay, it's time to get started. All right. So I'm Danielle Downey, and I represent Project APIS-M. If you didn't know, PAM is a nonprofit. We were founded and funded by beekeepers and almond growers about 20 years ago. This year will be our 20th anniversary. So we have always been in the business of trying to improve bee health, but primarily with the lens of pollination. So that means improving the health of bee businesses that are serving agriculture. So mostly looking at that pollination security question and the bees that are doing the work of pollinating our food. As we celebrate our 20 years of looking for ways to help and sustain the industry, the original PAM nonprofit, which was built to receive donations from agricultural business, is a 501c5. And this year we're celebrating our 20 years and we have now a 501c3 organization, which is a charity, and it's called the Bee Health Collective. So it has the same board, the same staff, and we hope that this new name and new identity and also the new tax designation will help capture more support from foundations and from individuals to help the beekeeping industry. So if you see the Bee Health Collective, just know that it's the same board and staff as PAM and a very similar mission, driving science to deliver innovation for healthy bees and healthy bee businesses. All right, well, if you know anything about PAM, you probably think of us as a research funder, and we do fund a lot of scientific research. In fact, it's over 200 projects and over $13 million in our 20 years. And each project that we fund is evaluated by a science advisory first to make sure the science is as good as it can be and up to standards, because that's always a moving target as science charges ahead. But ultimately, the beekeepers that sit on our board are the ones who make the funding decisions. And they base that on, does this project have potential to really help our industry, to inform our management decisions, to give us tools that we can actually use to protect our bottom line? We also have robust programs that are not strictly research. One example of this is our Seeds for Bees program. If you've seen cover crops planted around almonds in California with those yellow mustard flowers, that's our Seeds for Bees, one of our signature mixes. It's a mustard, and it's actually grown now to over 130,000 acres around almonds. So we would love to see that become a standard practice with almonds to give bees more diversity in forage to support them before and after the almonds are blooming. We also listen for industry concerns, and one example is a recent alarm about tropolalaps mites and the risk that they pose, and realizing we're not really prepared. If that did land on our shores, it could be a very damaging problem for our industry, and we were unprepared. And so Project APIS-M quickly put funds into research projects and trainings, and we have produced beekeeper-facing videos and training guides and sponsored people to go and see this mite and then come home and train the trainers. So your apiary inspectors may have been at these trainings, and making sure that there's resources available to answer people's questions and get us ready, at least being aware of what Tropicolaps is and what are the threats. Meanwhile, the science is also looking at how do we control it? How do we detect it? It's very small. So we fund efforts like that the industry identifies as high priority. You can find some of our written guides and video guides on our website and on other websites also. PAM is built with collaboration in our spirit. So we work with a lot of other organizations and beekeepers, and we respond however we can, whether it's research or forage or swinging in to do something that just makes sense. Our board of directors are operators in the industry. You can see their pictures on the left. Probably some of them are familiar to you because they are the people that are at beekeeping meetings. They're involved with their state organizations as well as national organizations. Together, they represent 37 generations of beekeeping and over 100,000 colonies. So these are guiding volunteers that care about the industry and help us make decisions at PAM to make sure it's really connected to what the needs and priorities are, which is always a changing landscape, as you know. And with that guidance, the programs that we have that I've described are now being complemented by a new program that Izzy's going to talk about. And it's to address a gap that has long been known to be a problem. And that is that registration for new products in our industry is really slow. There's not enough new things coming to market. We need more in our toolbox. And beekeepers in both the US and Canada have made repeated calls to speed up this process to deliver more bee health solutions. And there really was not a proposed solution to this until there was. And so with our support and Izzy Hill, this is a passion project for her. And she has the network and has been thinking about this and how to implement it for many years. And so our new program is to accelerate regulatory approval of tools. We can't do this alone. It's expensive to build a new program, and we are so grateful to have industry pledged funds to help us. You can see both the US and Canada represented in these sponsors, and we're asking for donations large and small. If you want to get involved and help support this after you hear about it, we would welcome that conversation. And there's a QR code if you'd like to know more or share it with your beekeeping club. So with that, I'd like to introduce Izzy Hill to tell you more about this effort. She's been recognized for her skills and knowledge in and outside of government, and especially for being able to bridge and bring together important efforts like this. She's very motivated, and we're excited to have her on the team. So Izzy, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Danielle. All right, let me share my screen. Hopefully this goes okay. 1 second. All right. Does that look okay to you?
I see a message that you're sharing your screen, but I don't see your screen. Let me see. That's on my end. I just don't see your slide yet.
That's not good. Hold on. Let me try and close this and try again.
There it is. Bee
Oh,
Health Regulatory Consortium.
great. All right. Well, let me know if there's any issues with sound or video. But again, thank you, Danielle, for that introduction, and to all of you for joining today. I'm so glad you're here to learn about this new effort. And as Danielle mentioned, I mean, this truly is a new program for PAM, and I just applaud the group for being nimble enough to address this and having the insights to know that I think this is going to really lead to some sea changes for our industry. So the consortium is called the Bee Health Regulatory Consortium. We will definitely get more into the details of this during our time here together. But as mentioned, my name is Izzy, and I am our Director of Regulatory Affairs. This is a new position with Project APISM. Since 2019, I was the departmental coordinator for honeybee and pollinator research at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've spent, uh, it's a little scary, almost 20 years at the interface of bees and the federal regulatory world. So I am so excited to share this new consortium concept with you all today. And hopefully the slide will change. All right. So I love these memes, and I wanted to start with a quick question for you all of how many times have you gone into something with very clear expectations only to meet a very different reality? Maybe it was a new job that you thought would be a great fit, or perhaps a home improvement project. Regardless of the situation, when expectations don't match reality, there's a gap. So, with all of that in mind, today we're really going to focus on a major problem that is facing our bee world, in that reality doesn't currently match our needs or expectations when it comes to bee health products. So, we're going to be looking at specifically gaps between uh, these um, between reality and expectations. But more importantly, we want to talk about the strategies in bridging these gaps. All right. So I'm sure that you all have friends who at some point assumed that when there's a new promising bee health product that's been developed by a researcher, it's going to immediately be in the hands of beekeepers and in colonies, lickety split. But in reality, that's not quite the case. It looks something a little bit more like this, where when you have a new product that's been developed, it then needs to, in most cases, be reviewed by a federal entity. So this could, depending on the product, be the Environmental Protection Agency or the Food and Drug Administration or the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. And depending on what the type of product is, easily can take 5 years, if not longer, to get a product to market. And this is partially due to regulatory requirements. And it can also be held up because of the costs to get these products to market. And I know of more than a hand's worth of friends who have gone bankrupt trying to get products to market for bee health. So that gives you an idea of how expensive this can be. And even once it's registered, there's rules around manufacturing requirements. You have to make sure, for example, that the product is pure. And then, even further down the line, you need to start thinking about distribution and retail and sales. So it is not as easy as it may seem. But today, what we really want to focus on in this ecosystem of getting products from the lab into your hands as beekeepers is this regulatory step, which has been problematic for a long time because typically this is not an area where those that have beekeeping expertise are focused. So we are really excited, again, to be bringing together these two areas of knowledge to try and address regulatory needs. All right. But I want to say going forward that having been at the EPA and also USDA in roles where I was working with federal regulations, I can tell you firsthand these regulations are not arbitrary. They're there for a reason. They're there to protect human health. They're there to protect the environment. They're there to make sure that products are pure so that we're not doing things like driving resistance. And so what we really want to do is make sure that we don't have adverse effects. But on the flip side, oh, it's not flipping. Now it's flipping. Okay. On the flip side, uh, regulatory hurdles can delay and impact a beekeeper's access to what is also necessary, which is bee health innovations. And so it's sort of a two-sided coin here. And we want to make sure that for our bee health innovations, we don't want to see things getting stalled. We want to make sure that they're reaching the field. And we also want to make sure that once they reach a beekeeper, they're not off the charts expensive or too complicated to use, for example. So again, we find ourselves facing this gap between expectations and reality. So in my mind, the way that I think about these problems is in the context of inefficiencies. Really, what we're dealing with here is that there aren't systems for dealing with these problems. It's just that we have least for our industry, been somewhat inefficient in how we've addressed it. And so oftentimes, and these are just a few examples of where these inefficiencies will pop up. The first is in one-off submissions for new products. I have seen, again, from where I've sat for the last long while, situations where you'll have something that is, a huge innovation in the lab, and then you'll see multiple companies at the same time pursuing the same new innovation when they could have shared the cost, right? They could have reduced the data requirement burden if they had been working together. And that would have had all sorts of trickle-down effects of there being, for example, more affordable product because not so much of the final product would have to cover the cost of the data requirements. So that's one example. Another is a lack of regulatory coordination and expertise, and this is very common. This is not this is not our industry per se by any means, but this happens um, quite often where we just are lacking the folks who are able to thread the needle when it comes to regulatory needs for new products. Third, there's limited feedback loops. And so this can really hamper our ability to share regulatory strategies with one another and know-how on how to get through the process for new products. But there's also researcher feedback loops that from where I sat at USDA prior was really important. So this happens on two fronts. The first is that we really need to have our sales open for new products. So this means working very closely with researchers to know what's coming down the pipeline. And for example, is it a new mode of action or does it have efficacy that's off the charts? Or is it going to be a product that we can put on for 5 cents a colony? These are all the types of things that we need to, again, sales open, be ready, be working hand in hand with our researchers. The other part is on the flip side, where I've seen really promising products come through labs that had a researcher known from day one, had they changed something just a little bit, maybe it was the formulation or the application method or like these tiny things that would never, understandably be on the front of mind when you're trying to develop a new bee health solution. But those little changes down the road can have massive impacts on the regulatory hurdles and costs that might pop up later down the line when you're trying to get that new product to market. So again, that's a place that we're really focused. So it's not just pushing for, all these regulatory needs, but also creating this ecosystem where we're working very closely with researchers so that we can be as nimble and responsive as possible. And then finally, there's no coordinated fundraising towards shared needs. And so here, excuse me one second. I'm going to turn off this beepy thing. There's no coordinated fundraising towards shared needs. So again, there are ways that we can be working together to help offset the cost of these data requirements that these companies are facing. The bee industry is tiny, 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 tiny when it comes to sales for any type of pesticide or therapeutic. I mean, it is incredibly small, and the cost to get these products to market is substantial. And so to date, the burden of this has been falling on the companies that are trying to get it to market. And then when it gets to market, it's very expensive, and we wonder why. So I think that there's a huge place here for us to think about how, when there is something especially promising that's going to fill a major gap, how do we as a community come together to help support getting that product to market? All right. And I know this is cheesy, but I love this saying that one bee is not a bee, i.e., a honeybee is not going to survive, right, without its colony. So we, in some ways, are quite similar. I think there's a real parallel here in terms of what we're talking about and the actual makeup of a colony. So with all that said, again, coming back to our solution for these problems and these inefficiencies is the Bee Health Regulatory Consortium. Again, this is Project APISM that has coordinated this. And essentially, there's a lot you could say about it, but in a nutshell, we're a regulatory support network. That's what we do. If there is an issue in a regulatory manner, especially one that's being faced by a lot of different entities, we are here to do everything we can to help. And this is a bit of a long slide, so I apologize in advance, but we're trying to collect questions that we've been getting on this thus far. So I want to make sure that it's clear to everyone what we are doing and what we are not doing. The first, obviously, is that we're trying to reduce our company registration cost and duplications, especially for data requirements. This happens all of the time, and data packages are super expensive. Easily, I can tell you, and a huge thanks again to Canada for sharing their package. But if we had not been gifted oxalic acid as the data package for that here in the United States, from, excuse me, from the Canadian Beekeeping Federation, we it was about $2.3 million that we would have had to pony up had we not been given that for free. So again, a huge thank you to Canada, and we hope to return the favor as we get into this and ensuring that what we're doing is also of benefit to beekeepers in that country as well. Secondly, we are here to try and address specific beekeeper needs. So this is where things get a little unique for us. Instead of just having all of these decisions driven by frankly, a lot of it's just luck, happenstance. You know, you might have a company who a researcher knows, they'll call and be like, hey, you know, like, are you interested in this license? Or maybe it's someone that a tech transfer group knew. So it's very much at this point when we see new bee products, they're being driven by those that are looking to commercialize it, which is fine. That's how things usually work in the world. But in this particular case, because we are Project APISM, and we have a board that has strong membership with commercial beekeepers that represent the industry's needs, we are planning to work very closely with our commercial beekeeping partners to better understand what their needs are. So when we do have situations where we need to be prioritizing what products to be supporting under the consortium, we're going to be relying on the feedback from our beekeepers of what it is they need. So that is something that's quite unique about this and something also that I'm quite excited about. Third, we are acting quickly on new innovations as much as possible. I mentioned that we want to have our sales open coming out of R&D. And so a lot of this is us continuing to be in lockstep with our researchers as they're working through problems in their labs. Fourth, we're looking to reduce the time to market. And again, a lot of this comes down to that coordination with our researchers and also with companies that are interested in pursuing registrations and authorizations for bee products. We're also looking to better coordinate our well, I guess we already said that. I think this is a typo. What I meant to say is coordinating specifically with our regulatory partners as we start to address some of the needs so that they too are ready and understanding of what's coming down the pipeline so that nobody's goosed in terms of expectations for what is going to be needed to get these products into the hands of beekeepers. We're also looking at more reduced risk solutions. So this has to some degree been happening anyway in our industry, but as we do have new technologies being developed, we are very excited to look at what types of bee health tools we might be able to implement long term that might carry less risk than some of the products that we currently have. And then we're also looking to support all bee health products. Just to clarify, this is not just for Varroa. We're looking at anything that could improve bee health. So to start with, this is going to be those types of bee health products that are applied specifically in a colony. Long term, in a future phase, we might even start to look at reduced risk pest management tools for crops that pollinators visit to be determined. But we're really trying to think about this in a holistic way. And then finally, as I mentioned, for most everything that we're doing, we're going to be seeking joint registrations with Canada. It's actually, I don't want to say easy, but it's not a huge lift to do it for both countries. And so it seems like a win-win to go ahead and go that route. So looking forward to that. What this isn't, we are not looking for shortcuts around regulations. We are not, although there are situations where we're working with a specific business on a problem, we are not looking to advocate through this consortium for a single product or business. Um, we are also spearheading new research, but rather trying to work in lockstep with our new developments. Um, Excuse me, I just said that very incorrectly. What I'm trying to say is we're not looking to spearhead new research, but rather when new research is coming out, that we're working in lockstep. So just to clarify, at least at this time, there's not a, we would not be the conductors of research. There might be situations where there's funding going towards research that would then support future products, but the consortium itself is very much regulatory based. And then finally, we at this time we're not addressing non-bee health product regulatory issues, if that makes sense. So if it's a bee health product, we're all on board in terms of regulatory support. But if it's a regulatory problem for something else in our industry, like ELAB or you name it, there's like dozens of examples. That is not something we're addressing at this time. All right. So coming back to this slide, why is this a PAM priority? As Danielle mentioned, it's always been a huge focus outside of Seeds for Bees and some other applied programs, but PAM's bread and butter has always been research. And so coming back to our diagram, um, as Danielle mentioned, this is our 20th anniversary here at PAM, and we are aiming to drive science and deliver innovation for healthy bees and businesses. And so um, obviously, Pam's done a fantastic job at the driving science part of this, but we really want to talk about delivering innovations. And honestly, delivering innovations is going to hinge, at least for bee health products, on regulatory pathways. So at the moment, if Pam is funding research that's working on discoveries to support new bee health products, sometimes these ideas die on the vine. I've seen it. This is nothing, this happens in all bee research funding. Doesn't matter who the funder is. It is to date really not been a requirement to think about what a regulatory pathway would look like for a product that's being analyzed in the lab. And so sometimes you get to the end of it, and even if it is the best product ever developed, it may just never make it because of the regulatory hurdles. So that's part of what we're trying to do here is that when we're seeing these new developments, we want to make sure that we are supporting them and paving the way for this research to actually make it through this process that's on the screen to reach the hands of beekeepers. And as I mentioned, there's also this really important feedback loop where we hope to be supporting researchers as they're coming up with new ideas for what they would like to research, that they be able to reach out to us and say, hey, what would the regulatory pathway look like for this product if it's designed in a certain way? And we can always say, maybe a tweak here, a tweak there. We'll have a whole network of regulatory support available to us that can help in guiding those types of responses so that, again, we can get these good products into the market sooner rather than later. All right. How the consortium operates. I'm going to skim through this a bit, but a lot of this is actually building those regulatory pathways and coordinating with our regulatory partners. And so this is where a huge kudos out to EPA and FDA and USDA because they have been fantastic in the 2 months that we've had this project going. They've been nothing but supportive in helping us understand what those regulatory pathways are and how we can, shorten some pathways that perhaps there are ways to get to a solution faster. So again, a huge thank you to our federal partners. Um, as I mentioned, we're working very carefully on these coordinated scientific pipelines. So maybe the Honeybee Health Coalition or Project APIS-M's funded projects or USDA. We really want to understand, again, what's coming through so that we can better support it. Um, and then we mentioned coordinated registration, but then also this collaborative funding, as I mentioned as well, where we're working together to make sure that one particular entity is not taking all of the risk on by themselves. So a really quick example of how this might look. So let's say there's a new discovery and it's going to be the greatest thing that beekeepers have ever seen, right? It's not going to go, and let's say it needs to go through a regulatory process, so it's not going to go straight to a beekeeper. Instead, how this consortium can help is that we want to do preliminary regulatory analyses to really understand what are the pathways, what are the hurdles, what are the costs of getting this product to market. And then, as I mentioned, we are planning to do beekeeper consultation. As we have products that become available, we want to make sure that we are pursuing priority products that best match up with beekeeper needs. And when we identify those priority products, in addition to our continual fundraising, which is very important for ensuring, that we're able to do this type of work, but we are also going to do specific fundraising for products. So let's say that this amazing new product is going to, I'm just going to make a number up, cost $1 million to get to market. Then we want to do as much fundraising as we can to offset the regulatory burden that would be falling on the companies that are registering it. And so who would be registering it? Consortium members. And so as a consortium member, they can opt in or out for any product. And so in this case, you may have one person that wants to, one consortium member that wants to register it, or you might have 20. But in any case, the costs are then split for the data that's required for the registration. And then the money that was raised in that previous step will be put towards the cost to help reduce the total cost of the data package. So this is a real win-win for our companies that are interested in getting these products to market. And then once we have that all worked out, that's where I step in terms of the registration process, and I will guide the product through whichever regulatory pathway it needs to go through. May it be, again, EPA, FDA, or APHIS. And then the product's approved. Then what? Well, consortium members then get to run with it and independently manufacture, distribute, and sell the product. So we will have no part of that. That is for the consortium members to take on, but we're excited to help them get to that point so that they can be successful. All right. And really quickly, I think it's important to mention who benefits from this and how, because it can seem on face value that this is, really like, oh, this was here to help companies, but that's not the case. It's really here to help the entire ecosystem. So for researchers, it helps with translational clarity. And also better aligning what they're doing with regulatory endpoints. And of course, there will most we're working through the specifics of this, but we want to make sure that a portion of the funds that we raise go back to continuing to support the development of bee health products so that we are never at a shortage of new ideas and inventions. And then in terms of businesses and manufacturers and retailers, obviously this reduces the regulatory risk, lowers the cost of entry. I'm quite excited about the cost of entry portion of this because we are looking forward to having consortium members that are not necessarily the folks you think about as businesses that register um, that typically are registering products. So this could be a bee club, for example. It could be an individual who just really is excited about a particular product. And to me, that's going to be huge in terms of again reducing those barriers to entry for some of our potential folks that can help with getting products to market. It's also going to help, obviously, with getting the product to market faster, which benefits everyone, but it also very much benefits these groups as well. And then for regulators, they're of benefit here too, because they're going to be getting higher quality submissions. They're not going to be dealing with products as much where someone goes bankrupt, which is, a huge drag on their very limited time. They're very strapped in terms of expectations and the workload they have. So this should be of help. And it's also going to help with clear framing of problems so that, again, when we do go in for a registration, it's clear for all parties on how we need to proceed. And then finally, for beekeepers, obviously huge benefits here too. One of the goals front and center that our commercial beekeepers have shared is that we really want to reduce the cost to beekeepers for these products, and obviously getting products faster and coming up with more variety to deal with resistance and rotation needs. Okay. And So this is a little redundant, but what does success look like for us? Just so you know, we're really looking to increase the number of regulatory submissions and reduce the time and cost that are associated with getting these submissions in. And obviously, the coordination piece is huge for us, and then an expanded toolbox. So hopefully, we'll get there. How to engage. So, a lot has been happening in the last 2 months. But if you're interested, we are going to start some of our upfront preliminary consortium meetups, most likely in April. So if you're interested in being a consortium member, please wait for a moment and I will share a slide with you that has my email on it. And just let me know that you're interested and we'll put you on the list. Also, as has been mentioned by Danielle and myself, donations and even fundraising campaigns. For example, if you have a bee club and you think your members would be very excited about funding something like this, we urge you to think about running your own fundraising campaigns to support. Also, we look for contributions and expertise or data. So, for example, if you're a researcher and you know promising bee products, that's great. If you have a background in things like regulatory pathways or consultation, please give us a heads up. And even if you're a registrant or, excuse me, a company that registers products and you have data that you're willing to share, these are all things that are very helpful for us. All right. So the time is now. I don't have to tell you any of this. You all know it already in terms of the threats that are facing our industry. But I will say that we're not alone. This has been recognized by some of our federal partners. There was uh, a great piece that was put out last July between the Department of Defense and USDA uh, that recognized that food security is national security in their National Farm Security Action Plan. And there's been continued work on that, especially in terms of specialty crop support. And so we're hoping that some of what we're doing here would fall under the interest again, from our federal partners in terms of ensuring our food security for our nation. All right. So next steps. The first off, obviously, you can make a donation. This will pop up again if you want to use this QR code. You can also go to Project Apis M's website and go to slash BHRC. And there's a link, but you can also do I don't know what that dash overview one is, but just go to BHRC. There's a link there for donations. I want to give a shout out to Barkman Honey, who is challenging all of you to do a one-to-one match. So Barkman has donated $50,000. And for every dollar that you donate, Barkman will put a dollar in. So you have been challenged. Gauntlet has been dropped. Thanks again to Barkman Honey. And then oops, sorry for that slide hiccup. If you are, again, interested in being a consortium member, here's my email. It's izzy@projectapism.org. And I can add you to that list. And then finally, uh, if you're just interested in keeping up with this consortium and what we're doing, but you really aren't interested in being a consortium member, which is fine, we do have a mailing list. So I'll leave this up for a moment so you can read it or write it down. But essentially, this is going to be our main way for communicating to those that might be interested, for example, in new regulatory developments or new products that might be coming down the pipeline as a result of the consortium. And so, thank you all. And again, here are the QR codes for donating or joining the mailing list, or if you're interested in being a consortium member, again, shoot me an email. But I appreciate your time. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions if there are any.
We do. Thanks, Izzy. We just have a couple of questions, and I bet some will come in while we're answering them. So first is a question about SARE grants and if SARE grants and associated research has soured on the creation of new products helpful for beekeeping. I'm not sure. Maybe
That's a
you
great
might handle.
question. I mean, that would be definitely be a question for those with SARE, which is the Sustainable Ag Research Education Program at USDA. I don't get the sense that that's necessarily the case. I imagine, and again, this is just my like my personal opinion is that they would most likely be interested in reduced risk products. Um, so that's my guess, but it would definitely be something to ask the coordinator for whatever the specific SARE project is, which they can differ to some degree depending on which one you're applying to. But my guess is if you're shooting for reduced risk, that would probably float better than proposing something that's of equal or greater risk to what is already available.
Next question. Canadian beekeepers can now make oxalic acid and glycerin products on their own. Is that possible in the US, or can you speak about that
Well,
situation?
that's a great question. And at least as of now, I do not think that is possible. And here's why is in the and this is where they're although Canada and the United States are quite similar in a lot of ways when it comes to regulations, one place that and honestly I didn't know until recently that Canada was different than the United States on this particular front, but in the United States, to do what is now being permitted in Canada is considered a manufacturing step because you are applying it's essentially a physical reaction, right? When you're applying heat to glycerin. And so that, because there are inherent risk involved, is considered an EPA manufacturing step, which requires, and sorry to get pointy headed on this, requires an EPA manufacturing facility. And those are, it's like a whole thing to get a facility recognized. Or EPA manufacturing rights. So that is the hiccup is that the two systems just aren't in, aligned are, they're not aligned on that particular front. So my guess is that you won't see that anytime soon here in the US.
There were a couple of questions asking about how the consortium will consider Canada and work with Canada to harmonize our efforts for both countries. Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. So, first off, I've spoken to several entities in Canada so far that have been nothing but supportive. Um, so, here in the United States, we have a super helpful partner called the IR4. They're actually funded through, I believe, the Farm Bill. But what they do is they help with minor crops like bees in terms of getting it's somewhat similar to our consortium, except they only deal with a small proportion of necessary data requirements that a specialty crop might face when getting a new product to market. And they only deal with EPA, where we're dealing with APHIS, FDA, and USDA. So, I mean, excuse me, EPA, FDA, and APHIS. So that's where some of the differences are. But I say all this because in Canada, there is an equivalent to IR4, and they have been nothing but supportive of helping us. So when we have something that would go through the process for registration, not only would we be calling IR4 like first on our list, on our speed dial of, hey, we've got a new product, like we need help with the data requirements that you guys typically help with. But the equivalent minor use group in Canada has also offered to assist with putting these packages together and helping with other necessary work that might need to be done. So my guess is that for nearly 100%, if I'll just say 100% of products that we're dealing with, we'll be also reaching out to that entity in Canada to get the process moving over there. Because the packages are, and I am not a PMRA, which is the equivalent of our EPA in Canada. I'm not an expert on that, but they are. And so that's great to have partners. Really stepping back for a moment, this entire consortium, may people be a consortium member or not, is a giant network of regulatory experts who are willing to help out. So again, like a huge kudos to, I mean, the list is too long. I'd say there's probably 20 different groups that are stepping up to help right now to make everything jive better. And again, one of them is the minor use coordinators in Canada. So huge thanks to them.
Izzy, if you would read the second question in the window, I'll answer the first question while you're reading it. The question I can answer is is Pam able to support private companies building innovations that do not need regulatory approval? And the answer is yes, we do that all the time. So we're very interested in solutions, and we fund proposals to move those things along. Typically, if it's a private company, it matters to have beekeeper endorsements. It also matters to have a research partner who is recognized and reputable so that it's not merely funding a private company to develop something that they're going to make profit from. So our next call for proposal deadline is June 1st, and it's open to uh, it's widely open. You can apply from multiple countries. Of course, our board is evaluating what will help beekeepers primarily in the US industry. So you can find that process and lots of information about how to apply for funding from PAM on our website.
Great. And just to clarify, Danielle, you mean the question about people who are already in the pre-registration
Yes.
meetings?
And the
Okay.
Tropicale Labs question,
Got it.
yes.
We'll deal with each of this separately. So thanks for the question. In summary, it is essentially if you're a company who is already ready to file with EPA, maybe you're already in pre-registration meetings, like can we still help? The answer is potentially yes. Go ahead and reach out to us. All of this is going to be case by case. All right. But again, we're going to do everything we can to help folks get their products across the finish line. And a lot of the problems, I don't want to say problems, but a lot of the hurdles that sometimes companies face are identical across submissions. And so as much as we can be assisting on that front, we're here to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out and we'll do what we can. The second question is how will we work with companies working on tropicale lapse? And the answer is absolutely. That's part of our goal. We want to address tropicale lapse. That is like high on our list. So for the US, and this is where the US and Canada differ just a little bit, in the United States, for a non-public health pest like tropicale lapse, um, efficacy data is not required. And so the registrations are actually identical for dealing with Varroa versus tropy. So really for us, the goal is going to be, and for us, I mean the United States, the goal is going to be to get more tools in the toolbox, right? And it doesn't matter, uh, you can just add the pest to the list. It's not going to be pest specific. It's not a big deal. Canada's different, where they do require efficacy for the targeted pest. So that's something again, that we'll want to be working with our minor use coordinators in Canada to make sure that we're addressing those efficacy regulatory needs appropriately.
All right, one more question. How will products be vetted by the consortium before assistance is offered?
So that is a great question too. So I think it's going to really depend on how many things we're getting in at once. So we've got a tracker going right now of possible products and it's long. But it's going to be a multivariate kind of question, right? And uh, I don't think I mentioned this, but we tried to get this consortium going back in 2019 when I was at USDA. So a huge shout out to Kevin Hackett and Jay Evans and Steve Cook and others who were, and Clayton Myers, others who were, there's a huge group trying to get this going. And as you can imagine, it's hard to start something this innovative uh, in a federal government setting. It's just, it's more suited for something like a nonprofit like PAM. So, with all that said, we did actually start going into what that would look like and all of the facets that we would want to consider. But I can tell you, each product is going to be assessed at a minimum on the following components. The first, obviously, is going to be efficacy. The second is going to be if it is something novel in comparison to what is already available to beekeepers. The third is going to be expected final price to the beekeeper. The fourth is going to be what is going to be the total cost for that regulatory package. And then the fifth is going to be what do we think about the timeline for getting that product to market? And I'm sure I'm missing like 100 other things that we would want to think about, but those are absolutely going to be top of mind. It's a cherry on top if it's reduced risk, right? That's really where we want to be heading with some of this. But those are going to be the types of questions that when we start to get good products presented or additional, but we already have some good products presented. But as we continue to, we want to make sure that we're using, um, really standardized metrics. So that's something we'll be developing when we start our consortium meetings in April, is to make sure that our consortium members agree with how we are setting up our matrix for decision making. But if you have any recommendations that you'd also like us to consider, feel free to shoot me an email.
And there's a kind of a follow-up to that about the funding through the consortium. And I think the involvement of the consortium is to get the data together and approach registration and get through those hurdles. And then at the point of formulation and delivery and marketing, the financial support would not come from the consortium anymore. The companies would be independently doing those parts. Is that correct?
That's right. So we'll do everything we can to offset the total cost of the data package, which my guess is it's going to vary depending on what the product is. If it's something incredibly innovative and like very clear benefit, my guess is that our crowdsource funding is going to go a lot further than something that is another, version of a product that we've already got registered on the same active ingredient, for example. So I imagine it will vary to some degree what the support is, but in the end, the more consortium members that want to go in on a product, the more affordable it's going to be for them. But they will be responsible for the rest. I will say with all of that, we are currently examining a consortium model that was put together by the California Citrus Quality Council and Jim Cranny and Ed Ruckert. And not that you know these folks unless you do. But anyway, this was done. We are not the first commodity to recognize this issue with registration issues. And so it was probably 20, I think it was 20 years ago that they decided to do what we're doing now. So again, not new. And the way that they designed it was that there was financial support for these consortium members in terms of the data requirements, but it was more like a bank, like a payback, like an interest-free loan that was then paid back over 10 years. And we are very much looking at that model because it was highly successful for the citrus industry. And that, yet again, is another financial incentive for those who are interested in being companies that register these products, because um, you're not going to find a deal like that anywhere else with a bank or whatnot. So it would more so be a royalty system where it's paid back, but then once it's paid back, it's done. So right now, that is most likely how we're going to um, set the stage for this consortium. But again, we want to have some really in-depth focus group conversations with our initial cohort of consortium members. So even if you're not interested in being a consortium member quite yet, but there's like a little tickle in the back of your brain, you're like, maybe in 10 years, we'd love to be in the consortium, go ahead and join, because this is going to be when we're setting up our governance documents, our frameworks, like all the things that are going to drive how this works is going to start to really pan out starting next month. So go ahead and get in on the conversation if you're interested.
And what is the commitment if somebody emails you and says they want to join? Is there a fee, or when will be the meeting be? Tell
Yeah,
tell us what would be involved if they do that.
right. So there's no fee. There may be one in the future, but we at this moment it is going to be free of cost to be a member of the consortium. And it may continue that way. And then we do not have a date yet for the consortium meeting, but we are going to be sending out an email to those that have expressed interest next week, probably Friday of next week. So if you are interested, please go ahead and send me an email so that I can get you on the doodle poll for selecting a good time that works for everybody in April.
Great. We don't have any more questions. I think that was a great slate of questions to end our discussion. So thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Yep. Thank you all. Take care.
Have a good day.